Hello crafty friends, I'm Lean from Studio Gato and today I'm sharing 3 Christmas cards and I'm very happy you're joining me because I'll also be sharing a ton of tips and tricks along the way for your layering stencils. I'll show you some tips and tricks to get a better result out of them without too much effort. I'll show you a couple of products that will help you step up your game if you want that, but most importantly, I'll show you some ways to get some different looks out of them. The stencils I'll be showing you today are all from Spellbinders. This first stencil set is called Layered Noel Foliage and it's really fun. There are coordinating dies available for each of these stencil sets as well, and all of the products will be linked in the description below. Now, to start off with the basics, I'll show you a couple of tools that I love that are very helpful. You don't need them, but I think they just speed the process along. I use a little inkstand mini which holds 4 ink cubes to hold my ink cubes while I'm blending. And when you're using layering stencils, you usually have a ton of colors out, so this is very helpful. I also use blending brushes because I think they blend better than those old foam tools we used to use. And good ink is important as well. I love the Conquer the Ninth inks. I think they give me great results blending every single time. But the most helpful tool in today's video is definitely my Misti. Now you can use anything that has a little corner where you can line things up. So I put my piece of paper in the corner of my Misti and I put each stencil layer in that same corner, and all of the stenciling will line up magically. You don't have to look at the markings on each stencil, which these do have, by the way. There are markings available, but I didn't have to use them because I put everything in my Misti. Now the first product to step things up is texture paste. This is Lunar Paste in the color Gold Rush. And I love this. It's a good gold texture paste. Sometimes you don't need glitter. This is just some metallic texture paste and I love it. Now each of the stencil sets I'm using today has one of these little detail layers which I'm working on now. This is just some stars and dots and little bits and bobs that just give a little bit of shine to, or just a little bit of filler in between the foliage elements. And I think adding a texture paste to those is a perfect way to add a little bit of a subtle shimmer or shiny look. And I love shimmer and shine on my cards, so I had to take that opportunity. Now, if you use texture paste, and I'm going to do it for this as well, while I'm blending my sentiment, you want to use that as the last layer in your layering stencil set. Because it's very hard to line a stencil up when you've already added texture paste. It just doesn't work as well. Now, maybe it would work because that first detail layer is really tiny details, so I don't think they'd be too disruptive, but still. For your best result, line up or use the layer for your texture paste as your final layer. Here you can see I have stenciled the sentiment separately on a separate piece of cardstock, and I'm going to cut that out separately as well. But the stencil set is designed for it to fit perfectly in between that foliage, so you don't have to stencil it on a separate piece of cardstock. I'm also going to turn this into a shaped card. I used the Essential Modern Ovals from Spellbinders, and I used the largest size oval to cut out my little stenciled panel, and I also cut a couple of extra pieces, but you'll see those later. I'm going to make a shaped card, but that means that my rectangular design from this stencil set doesn't fill it up nicely. I had a little bit of a gap there on each side of this panel and I didn't love it. So if you have that, or if you just want to add more to your stencil, just take your stencil and add some. It's really easy to do. Just use some masking paper or masking tape. I forgot it in a spot and I have some ink that ended up where it shouldn't have, but it's not that noticeable in the end. But yeah, masking tape is very handy in this case because you're most likely going to blend close to an edge. especially with these stencils, the way they're designed. So when you have some masking tape, this is very easy to do, but you do want to take that extra second to add a little bit of masking tape. But yeah, just fill out your design with more foliage. This stencil design is perfect for it. It's really easy to add to it, but you can do this with a ton of other stencils as well. Now, I've shown this in plenty of videos before, but here I go again, making a shaped card. I cut 2 ovals out of white cardstock, and in one of them I put a score line towards the top of my card base, what is going to be my card base. And on the area above that score line, I add glue. This is where I adhere that second white oval, and that is my card base finished. So you don't see anything of that fold on the front panel of my card, even if I don't glue a second panel on top of it, which I'm doing now. But yeah, the fold only shows on the back. It's a great way to make a shaped card. You can do this with any shaped die. It's really, really fun to get a different look. Now, I didn't even mention this yet, but another way to get a very fun and different look is using colored cardstock, which I've done for this card. I will do it for the second card as well, but it's a lot more subtle because it's a very light blue. But this light purple worked perfectly. So I love this. You just have to keep in mind a little bit of which colors you're going to blend on top. I probably wouldn't have put yellow flowers on top of this purple background because purple and yellow make brown. But yeah, if you stick to the basics of some color theory, you can easily stencil on colored cardstock. You don't want to go too dark, probably too dark of cardstock, but you can probably find a way around that too with some white pigment ink. I actually love using white pigment ink for some fun stencil techniques. I didn't even get to that with this video. I kept it pretty basic. All you need is your standard inks, maybe some texture paste, but that's optional. So yeah, I think I did pretty good keeping things simple today. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet is something that brings a lot of punch to your designs, and that is using multiple colors of ink or multiple shades of ink on one layer of this stencil set. So you can see that I always go in with one shade first, I blend on everything, and then I go in a shade darker and I blend just partially, just to add some shading. You can see that throughout this video. I've done it for every single layer except the one with tiny, tiny details. Now, it may seem like a very basic tip and it may not look like much on camera, but I swear it packs such a punch. It makes a huge difference than if you would just blend or use one shade of ink for each layer of your stencil set. Now, you can get around this. If you don't have many inks, you can just blend more lightly with one ink and then go in with that same ink and just darken it up in certain spots. That will give you the same result. I just have pretty many ink cubes by now. I have a decent amount by now. I've collected them over the years, and this is just a little bit simpler for me because I can plan out my colors beforehand. I know what my darkest shade will be. It's just a little bit more simple for me. But if you don't have as much ink, you can definitely get around this by just blending more heavily in certain areas and more lighter in others. Again, I'm going in with some gold glimmer paste. This is from Nuvo for that detail layer. And I did stencil my sentiment on top of this, and I already cut it out with the coordinating die. So I did have to stencil it on there because I needed to use that coordinating die to cut a window in this card. I have again used some light blue cardstock, so some colored cardstock. But I'm going to put this on top of a white card base just to add some extra stability. I like to work on a separate panel. So I have to cut my window for my sentiment also out of the front of the card. So I lined up my panel, I lined up the die in that window, and then I just traced around the inside of the die with a pencil. And then I can line that up again on the front of my white note card. Now, this is a really easy thing to do. It looks and sounds a little bit convoluted when I'm explaining it, but it's super easy and it's a really fun design. I actually recently did it with a birthday card. I stepped it up a little bit and had a different design on the inside, a little bit of a surprise balloon. I was very proud of that card. But you can easily do it with these stencil sets from Spellbinders as well, because there is a coordinating die for that sentiment available. And I think that's a very easy and fun way to step these layering stencil sets up. So once that window was cut out of the front of my card and out of my front panel, I can glue those together. And then I am going to take my pencil again and trace that window to the inside of my card as well. Because I don't just want a window, I want the window to look into something. So I'm going to stencil on that sentiment on the inside of my card. That way when the recipient opens it, they still see some of the design, and I think that's really fun. Now even for this sentiment layer, I'm using multiple shades of ink to add more depth to this. Now, each of these stencil sets is built up a little bit similarly, so each sentiment has 2 layers in these stencil sets. You have that scripty layer, and then you have a layer that adds a drop shadow to this, and it's really fun. And you can absolutely shade this with some gray ink. That would be fun, a really good subtle look. But I wanted to make it look a little bit more like the letters were 3D. So I am using some more blues here, and I am again making it darker at the bottom, and it's such a fun look for that sentiment. I could just make a bunch of cards with just the sentiments. Those would be really fun as well. Add some die cuts around those. So fun. Now, I've already shown you plenty of ways to step up your stencils. You can use multiple inks in one layer. You can use texture paste. You can cut a window in your design with some coordinating dies. You can add more stenciling with the same stencils, just moving them around a little bit. You can easily step up these stencil designs. I'm sure I've mentioned more throughout this video, but a really fun way is to get a sketchy look for these stencils. I love doing this. I know it's not everyone's style, so I kept this card for last. But it's a really easy way, and it's so affordable. I know not everyone can afford a bunch of inks, and I know not everyone can afford a bunch of texture pastes. I know I have 4 jars of texture pastes, and I can barely touch them because I'm so afraid of running out of them. And then they dry out on me anyway. So I am going through the whole stenciling process again. I thought it was worth it to show you everything because this is a video all about stenciling. So here you can very clearly see with these larger flowers what a big difference it makes when I go in with a darker shade of ink and leave some light ink blending for the highlights. It makes such a difference. Now I am going again with the sentiment, masking off parts of your stencil so you can add more different colors to your design is also really fun. So I am going to mask off that sentiment so I can blend all the floral details, and then I'm going to go in with my sentiment. Again, I'm going to use multiple shades of ink to make it darker at the bottom this Merry Christmas. I'm going to do the same exact thing for that shadow layer or that 3D layer. Now this is sped up to the high heavens. You can clearly see that. I don't move that fast. But these cards are still pretty simple to make, even with the sketching I'm doing now. And this is one of my favorite things to do. This card took me 30 minutes to make because there's also no assembly involved. I'm going to die cut this panel out with a rectangle die, a basic rectangle die. I'm going to add it to the front of my note card, and that's it. This card is finished. Now, I think stenciling is all fun and good, but sometimes you just want an outline. And you can easily do that by just tracing inside of your stencil pattern with a black fine point pen that I'm using now. But I like a more sketchy look, so I freehanded around it, and I do purposely not follow the outline. So I know I say I don't do it personally, and I know it sounds like I'm just not capable of following an outline, but I really do like the look. So I do try to make it more sketchy and make it more imperfect than it would be if I was following the outline. And then I also go in with some white highlights with a gel pen, just some dots here and there. And then I sort of forgot that these stencil sets all have that little detail layer with all of these little stars and dots that fill in the gaps in the stencil. And I just made my own dots. I do first add some highlights to the sentiment as well. But yeah, this was such a fun card to make, and it's a little bit more personal, I feel, because I draw on it. Now again, I am barely scratching the surface with all the ways you can step up your layering stencils in this video. I should definitely make more videos about layering stencils. I love them so much. But you can definitely step this up in different ways. Add some colored pencil to these to add more details of your own. That would be really fun. Even alcohol markers. You can color over this with alcohol markers and add more detailed shading than you can get with blending brushes. So that would be really fun as well, and will give you a totally different look. I personally love, my favorite things are to stencil on colored cardstock. I forget it often that you can, but it's so fun when it works out. Sometimes, I mean, it takes some trial and error to get the colors right, but pale colors, you can almost never go wrong with it. Maybe your ink colors will show up a little bit darker, but there's no problem in that. So yeah, that's it. 3 Christmas cards done. I stumbled my way through this voiceover a little bit. I'm really sorry about that, but I just had so many ideas to share. I feel like I still missed some. Maybe I should have scripted this video, but I never do. So yeah, I hope it was still helpful. I really like the cards I made. I hope you like them too. I definitely recommend layering stencils for Christmas if you are looking for a gift for yourself or for someone else. But also, if you need to make a ton of Christmas cards, layering stencils are very, very helpful. I hope you like this video. I hope you are inspired to create some cards of your own and maybe start on your Christmas cards, because this is the earliest I've ever started on my Christmas cards, and I'm very happy I did. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.